What's going on, sports fans, and welcome to another episode of Fantasy Haus Live. This time we got a little bit, well, I shouldn't say it's really any different. We have the orange Astros this time because the main ones are charging, so we're gonna let these ones, we're gonna rock with the orange guys. Anyways, we had week 2 of our playoffs go down, and it was actually a pretty fascinating week, if I do say so myself. Like I said, or kind of, well, not really like I said, but kind of continuing the trend like we did last week. There won't be any power rankings because they are already finalized. So the next thing we are going to do is going to be the reviews of the week. So it'll be a winners bracket review, a winners consolation bracket review, and then it'll be a losers bracket review. And then when we and then we'll skip the power rankings, like I said, and then we'll go into the previews of the next week or our final week. Can you believe it? We're already going to be in the final week where we will kind of find out who our winner is. So we have this episode, and then the next episode will be our final episode of Fantasy Haus Live for this season. Crazy, right? But we shall in the preview we'll have obviously one winners bracket match, 2 winners consolation bracket matches, I believe, and then two losers bracket matches. So without too much further ado, we are gonna get right into the action. But before that, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Much love as always. If you haven't already, please feel free to hit that subscribe button. Additionally, you can feel free to leave a comment right down below. If you disagree with me, you agree with me, you want to leave some other sort of witty comment, feel free to do so. I always love to read them. You guys are amazing. Let's go. Okay, so starting with our winners bracket, we had two matchups in our winners bracket, which was Team Nuge going up against Champ Cheese, and in which case Champ Cheese able to pulled off the upset last week against Bob's Burgers, pulls off the massive upset of the number 1 overall top dog in the entire league. Was looking to be league favorite for quite the longest time, but that is no more, and the Team Nugent sending him down to the winners consolation bracket. Then in the bottom bracket, or I guess should say the second bracket of the of this next matchup here, we saw CeeDeez Nuts fall to the Cheetah Hill, who had been looking to continue their dominant ways, now looking to set his sights on the league title. But he honestly, this is going to be a showdown for the ages, folks. He's got to go against the league champ, the current champ, the defending champ in Champ Cheese. Champ Cheese was able to get the victory over Team Nuge by a score of 167 to 136. While the Cheetah Hill was able to get a pretty comfortable lead and victory over CeeDeez Nuts with a score of 171 to 81. But as always, we're going to take a dive into how these matchups broke down. And of course, we're going to start with these top 2 matches. But first, we're going to start between our big heavyweight matchup between Champ Cheese, and Team Nugent. So in this first matchup for our quarterbacks here, we had Gardner Minshew continuing Minshew mania, throwing up 26 points in that pretty much shootout loss with Dallas. Then for Team Nuge, Trevor Lawrence was able to get 20 points in the win over the Jets. In our battle of the running backs, Delvin Cook only able to get 10 points in the win over the Giants, while Christian McCaffrey continuing just to be a beast. Can't say nothing more about it. Able to get 13 points in the win over Washington. Then in the second matchup of running backs, we have, we'll just stay with Team Nugent right away, with Tony Pollard, who was able to get 14 points. So honestly, I think that man has definitely got to be the RB1 there, right? Like, he's definitely been doing better than Zeke in like yards, receptions. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're 2 amazing backs, but I think Pollard is considered the number 1 there, maybe. Then for Champ Cheese, we have Saquon Barkley throwing up 27 points in a monster game, despite losing to Minnesota. Then in the first set of wide receivers, for Justin Jefferson for Champ Cheese, able to throw up 31 points, so he had a huge game against the Giants. while CD Lamb for Team Nugent was able to throw up 34 points in that big win over Philly. In the matchup of the Philly receivers for Champ Cheese, Devontae Smith was able to throw up 31 points, while AJ Brown for Team Nugent was only able to get 16 in the loss to Dallas. Then in the matchup of the tight ends, we have Dalton Schultz, who was got a pretty modest, I'd say, 7 points in that win over Philly, while Mark Andrews only was able to get actually pretty similar stat line between these two, as Mark Andrews would get 7.5 points in that win over Atlanta. Then in our flex spot, we had Christian Watson able to get 10 points before he went out with injury. He did not score a touchdown this time, but he is remaining that kind of number one wide receiver there now, which is, I mean, kind of sad for Allen Lazard, but I mean, he's still like the best blocking wide receiver in the league, and Christian Watson is just so good. Then, but he did go out with a hip injury. He did not return, I believe, and has been questionable this week. I should actually look more into that, but we can save that for further down the line. Then T. Higgins was able to get 26 points in the win over. Oh my God, yeah, 26 points in the win over New England. Then in the defenses, the Bucks threw up 8 points on Arizona, despite the fact they had Trace McSorley at QB. Then Tom Brady. Then the Cowboys were able to get 4 points in the shootout win with Philly. And then in the kicker spot, we have Graham Gano throwing up 14 points in that loss to Minnesota, while Nick Folk threw up a goose egg in the loss to Cincy. And then in our second, I guess, winners bracket matchup, it saw the Cheetah Hill getting a very dominant win over CeeDeez Nuts by a score of 171-81. So in our first kind of matchup here with the quarterbacks, Tua only able to get 13 points in that loss to Green Bay, where he threw 4 picks. They're saying he's questionable now with yet another concussion, so he's really gotta start evaluating things from a career standpoint. Then across for the Cheetah Hill, you have Dak Prescott, who threw up 31 points. Looks like an MVP candidate in the shootout win with Philly. Then if we move into the running backs, we'll just continue Cheetah Hill here, and Austin Eckler, aka Muscle Hamster, throwing up 23 points in that very handy win over the Colts. Then James Conner for CeeDeez Nuts threw up 25 points in the loss to Tampa. In the second matchup of running backs, Ramondre Stevenson got only 3 points this time in the loss to Cincinnati, while Jerick McKinnon for the Cheetah Hill continuing to be, I think he's the number one back there now, able to get 12 points, looking fantastic. Good for him. I know they had Pacheco back there for a bit, but it seems like McKinnon's kind of surpassed him, especially in the receiving game. Then if we look in the wide receivers, we have DeAndre Hopkins only able to get 1.4 points, just without Kyler Murray back there. It's been pretty hard for him to get points consistently. I actually have him in my work league, and I actually did bench him. Then for Cheetah Hill, we had Tyreek Hill, who just continues to produce no matter what, able to get 14 points. In the second matchup of wide receivers, we'll just continue with Cheetah Hill here, and Amon-Ra St. Brown having a phenomenal season yet again with 14 points in the loss to Carolina. Then Garrett Wilson was only able to get 5 points in the loss to Jacksonville, and Tyler Conklin, just continuing straight into the tight ends here for CeeDeez Nuts, was only able to get 7 points in the loss to Jacksonville, so kind of another day kind of struggled there. While Evan Ingram went off for 18 points in the win over the Jets, and Evan Ingram just having a resurgence there in Jacksonville. Then in the flex spot, we had Joe Mixon after, I think he's a couple games back from injury now. It threw up 17 points in the win over New England, while Jalen Waddle able to get 25 points despite losing to Green Bay. Just an electric offense they have there in Miami. In the battle of the defenses, the Browns got 5 points in the loss to New Orleans for CeeDeez Nuts, while the Cheetah Hill had Jacksonville's defense, who was able to go for 13 points in the win over the Jets. Then in the last matchup for our winners bracket here, Evan McPherson saw 3 points in the win over New England, while Brett Maher was able to only get 18 points in the win over... I say only. I was like, this is a kicker we're talking about, getting 18 points in a big win over Philly. I mean, a very close NFC East, which, you know, I feel like a few seasons ago it was notoriously bad, and now it's almost, I think every team in that division has a winning record, which is crazy. All right, now we must go into our consolation bracket, which was really only one game at the moment. And that saw Bob's Burgers actually pulling up a upset over Destinooooo, who was, I believe, the number 3rd overall top dog coming into the playoffs. And Bob's Burgers was able to win that matchup by a score of 139 to 108. So not the biggest score margin, but still pretty decent. 30 points is actually pretty large in fantasy football, which, I mean, a lot of you know that already if you're watching this. Okay. So if we take a look at how that broke down, as always, starting with the QBs, Jared Goff able to get 29 points in that loss to Carolina, who I don't think anyone was going to guess that he was going to have a resurgent career with Detroit. But good for him, honestly. Then Patrick Mahomes for Destino got 26 points in the win over Seattle. Mahomes, another MVP candidate. In the battle of the running backs, we'll start with Bob's Burgers, who had Najee Harris go off for 15 points in the win over... It went off for 15 points in the win over Las Vegas, while Nick Chubb for Destino was able to get 11 points in the loss to New Orleans. Then in the second running back spot, we had Jamal Williams back for Bob's Burgers, able to get 3.4 points in the losing effort to Carolina, while Josh Jacobs for Las Vegas, who is probably one of the very only lone bright spot of that Raiders team, who has just benched Derek Carr for the season, I believe, which, you know, really casts a really dark shadow over what is going to happen with that Raiders team, what's going to happen with Carr's future, what's going to happen with Tay's future. It's all going to be kind of up in speculation right now. Then we look. Oh, I think Josh Jacobs only gets 6 points in that loss to Pitt, by the way. Then for the wide receivers, we'll just stay with Destino. Adam Thielen was only able to get 1.6 points because it was Justin Jefferson's day in that win over the Giants. Then for Bob's Burgers, there was Keenan Allen, went off for 21 points in the win over Indy in the second wide receiver spot. In the second set of wide receivers, we have Christian Kirk, only able to get 5 points for Bob's Burgers in that win over the Jets, while Jerry Jeudy able to get 17 points in the loss to the Rams. In the battle of the tight ends, there was TJ Hawkinson for Bob's Burgers, who just had a phenomenal day, going off for 35 points in the win over the Giants. Well, Travis Kelce, one of the few tight ends I've seen perhaps be also considered for MVP consideration, able to go off for 17 points in the win over Seattle. Then in the flex spot, we have DJ Chark going off for 14 points in the loss to Carolina, while DJ Metcalf went off for a similar stat line of 15 points in the loss to Kansas City. Then if we glide on into the defenses here, back to Bob's Burgers with the 49ers, who were only able to get 6 points in that win over Washington, while the Ravens, I almost said Rams, were able to get 7 points in the win over Atlanta for Destino. And then finally, Justin Tucker for Bob's Burgers was able to get 8 points in that win over Atlanta, while Harrison Bucker for Destinooooo was only able to get 7 points as well. So pretty much, actually, take that back. Tucker was able to get 8. Bucker was able to get 7 in that win over Seattle. Which now brings us to our losers bracket match. Well, matches. In our losers bracket matchups, we have 2 of them. So the first one, you can kind of see how these brackets do it for the losers bracket. They started off with how it was the current standings, I believe, as it went into the playoffs. Then the teams played, and now they switched, and then they'll switch again because obviously you can see the results. So it's like these 2 sets of teams are battling for first, third, so it's like 5th and 7th, I believe, set of spots. But the first one we're going to take a look at is the Bajayjays, who got a narrow win over Team Breeki, 100-77. So if we look at the QBs, Kirk Cousins able to get 27 points as he's been looking pretty damn good these last few weeks in the win over the Giants, while Jalen Hurts did not play at all. So Team Breeki just did not. I mean, I get it, losing the in the losers bracket, losing season. So I feel it, but yep, lost out on points not having them there. Then if we move into running backs, we have Cam Akers, who just insane out of like the story, just because he was pretty much gone at the beginning of the season, requested a trade, and due to injuries now he's back and he's producing pretty good. Obviously, as you can see, that as he put up a 34-point stat line over the win over Denver, while Derrick Henry able to get 18 points in the loss to Houston. Then if we move into the next set of running backs, we have Elvin Kamara, who was able to throw up 19 points in the win over Cleveland, while Aaron Jones for Green Bay was able to throw up only 5 in the win over Miami for Team Breeki. Staying with Team Breeki in our first set of wide receivers, Stephon Diggs only able to get 4 points as he was, which is pretty shocking considering they were playing Chicago. Then for the Bajayjays, Michael Pittman Jr. able to get only 7 points this time. So another down week for, I mean, it's not necessarily his fault, as a lot of that Colts team seems to be pretty much on the down. In our second matchup of wide receivers, Mike Williams went off for 11 points in the win over Indy, while Davante Adams has another struggling day in that offense on that just very struggling Raiders team. Only able to get 3 points this week in the loss to Pitt. Then in our tight ends, we'll stay with Team Breeki for now, with Pat Freiermuth, who's able to get 13 points, so a big week for him in the in the win over Vegas, while Jared Everett for the Bajayjays was only able to get 0 points in the win over Indy. So I don't remember if he played or not, but either way, unfortunate to throw up the donut. Then in the flex spots, Kenneth Walker III able to throw up 12 points, so that rookie sensation just continuing to do his thing in KC despite losing, while Allen Robinson also, I believe, on IR throwing up another goose egg, so just hindering his team a little bit there. Then in the defenses, the Broncos defense throwing up -4 points, so this one actually hurt the Bajayjays here in the loss to the Rams, as it was a complete just blowout 51-14 loss, just sheesh. Then the Bills were able to get 11 points in the win over Chicago. Then lastly, Cameron Dicker able to get 8 points in the win over Indy, while Dan Carlson able to get 5 points in the loss to Pitt. Okay, and in our last matchup for the reviews of round 2, we saw the Lame Tanks get the win over the Deviants. So starting off with the QBs as per usual, Josh Allen starting off for the Lame Tanks, going off for 24 points in that win over Chicago. Lamar Jackson didn't even play for the Deviants because, you know what, he's on IR. So goose egg there. In the matchup of running backs, Leonard Fournette went off for 25 points after being kind of overshadowed by Rachaad White there in the win over Arizona. Then DeAndre Swift only able to get 3 points in the loss to Carolina. In the next matchup of running backs, we had J.K. Dobbins able to go for 5 points in that win over Atlanta, while Miles Sanders for the Chicago Deviants going off for 6 points. I say going off, able to get 6 points in the loss to Dallas. Then in our first wide receiver matchup, we have Amari Cooper for the Lame Tanks, getting 13 points despite losing to New Orleans, while Robert Woods able to get 7 points in that loss to Houston. In our second wide receiver matchup, George Pickens for the Deviants was able to get 16 points in that big win over the Raiders, while DJ Moore able to get 20 points in the 37-23 win over Detroit. Moving into the tight ends, George Kittle able to go for 30 points in the win over Washington as he continues to build a rapport with Brock Purdy. Then Hunter Henry for the Deviants he was not able to get anything. Another goose egg for him. In the flex spot, there was Michael Gallup able to go off for 13 points in that win over Philly, while Devin Singletary went for 20 points in that win over Chicago. In the battle of the defenses, the Packers had 9 points in that win over Miami, while the Rams had 21 points in that huge blowout win over Denver. Then lastly, in the kickers, we had Matt Gay for the Lame Tanks, shooting for 19 points in the win over Denver, while Tyler Bass able to get only 2 points in the win over Chicago for the Deviants. All right, and that kind of concludes the review section. So now we're going to shift gears and go into our previews for the final round of the season and of the playoffs. So now we are going to take a look at how this round 3 final is shaping out. In our winners bracket, it is coming down to the Champ Cheese, 7-7, 500 on the record on the season. Surprising quite literally myself, and I think maybe everyone in the league, getting into that wild card spot and upsetting quite literally everyone to get here. Then the Cheetah Hill, I don't think there was any doubt that anyone thought for a second that he wasn't going to be here in the final. The man has balled out all season. He's slayed pretty much every team and has been a consistent top dog all season. So this final is going to be crazy. We're going to take a look at how it's currently shaping out, and we'll take some picks, eh? So starting at the top, we have Minshew Mania and Philly taking on New Orleans versus Dak, and Dallas taking on Tennessee. Ooh. Even though New Orleans is not that great, and Gardner did have a good game, Dak's gonna have the better day here. Tennessee's just garbage right now. In the battle of the running backs, we have Dalvin Cook in Minnesota going against Green Bay versus Austin Eckler and the Muscle Hamster, and the Chargers taking on the Rams. Backs have been gashing us for pretty much ever, you know. So I'm gonna go ahead and say Dalvin's gonna actually have a big day, while Eckler, I mean, this is the Rams, so they're definitely not the same Rams that won the Super Bowl. So Eckler will definitely have a good day, but I think just because, so I think Dalvin just might have just slightly the better day. Then in the second matchup of wide receivers of running backs, we have Saquon Barkley for the Giants and Champ Cheese going against Indy versus Travis Etienne in Jacksonville going against Houston. Oh man, both these backs are going to feast. These are both pretty terrible defenses. I think Indy's is actually probably a little bit worse. Houston has been actually fighting a few teams. Kept up with the Chiefs, kept up with a few teams, and I mean, they're not very good, but I think Saquon might actually get the better day here, but not by much. Then in the battle of the wide receivers, we have Justin Jefferson in Minnesota going against Green Bay versus Tyreek in Miami going against New England. Well, if the first game was anything like it, I think Justin Jefferson will be in for another big day. They're just been laying, that Vikings offense has just been laying like scorched earth, especially with the addition of Tyler Hawkinson. But you got to look over at the Dolphins, that they are one of the most electric in the league, and Tyreek. But that New England defense is a little bit better than, well, that's actually a good question. Would the Green Bay defense be better than New England's? Because they're both kind of the middle, but that's more related to their offenses. We do have, because Green Bay plays a lot of zone, and almost always zone. I think Justin Jefferson might have the bigger day, but I'm 100% ready to eat my words on that. Then in the battle of the second wide receivers, we have Devontae Smith and Philly going against New Orleans versus Amon-Ra. St. Brown and Detroit going against Chicago. Got to go Amon-Ra. Just Goff and that team have just been on fire. In the next matchup, we have, for the tight ends, we have Dalton Schultz and Dallas taking on Tennessee versus Evan Engram and Jacksonville taking on Houston. Despite the fact that Dallas is a very good team and Tennessee is not, they've been kind of just like up and down all week, I think Evan Engram's going to have a very nice game against that very vulnerable Houston team. He's coming off a huge game already, so he'll just looking to keep that momentum going. Then in the flex spot, we have Christian Watson in Green Bay going against Minnesota versus Jalen Waddle in Miami going against New England. Ooh, this one might have to go to Jalen Waddle just because the man can just score from out of nowhere. I mean, much like Tyreek, but even if you look at the Green Bay game, even he just took that thing to the house with that speed. I do expect that Christian Watson will have a very good game, as a lot of wide receivers have gashed the Vikings. So hopefully Watson will have a good game. But I think if you're looking at it as like a consistency wise, there's a higher floor for Jalen than there is for Christian, in my opinion. Then if you look into defenses, we have the Giants taking on Indy versus the Jags taking on Houston. Oof. That Jags defense is very good. Giants defense been pretty much up and down, but going against a very bad Indy team, I might have to roll with Jags on this one. Going against Houston. And then in the kickers, we have Graham Gano and the Giants going against Indy versus Brett Maher and Dallas going against Tennessee. It's hard to tell, because Maher went off for a good game last week. Both these kickers are very good. Both these teams that they're going against, but in Indy and Tennessee, are not that great. Pretty terrible, actually, especially in Indy's case. But if that means the Giants' offense can score a lot, then that only means that Graham Gano might only be limited to extra points, which is less points, while Maher, who you never know what side of the Tennessee coin you're going to get, the good side or the bad side. And if they decide to show up like they did against the Chiefs, then who knows? Maybe Dallas might be in for a bit of a fight, and with less kicking. But who knows? But I guess for the pick, we'll go Maher off of my explanation as I was kind of going through it. Now, if we go into our consolation bracket, we look at CeeDeez Nuts and Team Nuge squaring off against each other for the third place in the third place game. So, starting at the top, we have Tua in Miami going against New England versus Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville going against Houston. Assuming all these players here play that have the Q next to them, Tua probably shouldn't play, because if it's true that he does have another concussion, that could be really bad. Oh, I didn't realize that might also, if Tua is out, that also will totally affect some of the production out of both Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. So, I mean, that's to be expected, but it could be like heavily impacted in a week that you can't have it, Going against Trevor Lawrence and Jacksonville going against Houston, and you definitely, I think, in my opinion, you got to roll with Trevor Lawrence on this one. Just Houston defense, just terrible. You don't even know if Tua is playing. That's the only one that I say is just like, you can assume all the others are playing, but Tua's was probably one that was actually a concussion right away. Unless some of these other players got up by concussion, but that's another story. Anyways, so in the running back ones, we have James Conner and Arizona going to Atlanta versus McCaffrey and San Fran going to Vegas. Got to go McCaffrey, one of the best backs in the league. Known, I think he's also one of the highest fantasy point scorers this year as well, going against a terrible Vegas team. In the battle of the RB2s, we have Tony Pollard and Dallas going against Tennessee versus Ramondre Stevenson. In New England going against Miami. I think probably Pollard, honestly. I think Miami will probably be able to figure out and button up the Patriots a little bit. In the battle of the wide receivers, we have DeAndre Hopkins in Arizona going against Atlanta versus CeeDee Lamb and Dallas going against Tennessee. Got to go with CeeDee Lamb because Hopkins just doesn't have anyone good throwing him to at the moment. In the wide receiver twos, we have Garrett Wilson of the Jets taking on Seattle versus A.J. Brown and Philly going against New Orleans. A.J. Brown, because he's the number one there. Jalen Hurts and Gardner Minshew's even shown that he can throw to both and make both of his wide receivers, his 1 and 2 wide receivers, very productive. Garrett Wilson, very dependable, but the Seahawks are also good, and the Jets seem to have kind of not. They're going through yet another QB change, so I don't think he'll have a better week than A.J. Brown. Then in the tight end matchup, we have Conklin for the Jets playing Seattle versus Andrews playing against Pitt. Probably Mark Andrews, as he's just the better tight end overall, while Tyler Conklin's pretty much almost always averaged at least like very low single digits. Then in the flex spot, we have Joe Mixon and Cincy going against Buffalo versus T. Higgins and Cincy going against Buffalo. So these two guys. Two Cincy dudes. T. Higgins, a nice one of those surprise kind of I wouldn't say breakout, but surprises on that Cincinnati team that's been killing it. But Joe Mixon though, you can't count him out. I'm gonna guess Joe Mixon's gonna have the better day against Buffalo. I think Buffalo's pass defense is gonna be a little better and a little bit more stiff. In the battle of the defenses, we have the Browns and Cleveland taking on Washington versus the Cowboys, and Dallas taking on Tennessee. Oof, gotta go with the Cowboys on this one. Just picking up a matchup based. Then if we go into the kickers, Evan McPherson and Cincy taking on Buffalo versus Nick Folk in New England taking on Miami. I think Folk might have more opportunities for field goals, but watch that I put my foot in my mouth and Evan McPherson goes off. Okay, then in our 5th place game, we have Bob's Burgers taking on Destinooooo. So in the first QB matchup, we have Goff and the Lions going against Chicago versus Patrick Mahomes and KC going against Denver. This is actually be close, but I think you got to roll with Mahomes, the MVP. Despite the fact they're going against Denver, I think he's just going to pick them apart. I will expect Goff to have a good stat line. In the running back one situation for these teams, we have Najee Harris and Pitt going against Baltimore versus Nick Chubb and Cleveland going against Washington. I think Najee Harris is primed for the bigger day. I like Chubb a lot, although I just think Washington's defensive front is a little bit more stout. In the running back 2 spot, we have Cordell Patterson in Atlanta going against Arizona versus Josh Jacobs in Las Vegas going against San Francisco. Cordell Patterson has been kind of in like a timeshare, so I think I'm going to go with Josh Jacobs on this one, despite the fact that it's probably going to be a low score because it's going against San Francisco and they have a very good defense. In the wide receiver ones, we have Keenan Allen and the Chargers going against the Rams versus Adam Thielen in Minnesota going against Green Bay. Thielen saw low, I think he saw maybe like a single target last game because Justin Jefferson feasted. Keenan Allen going against a vulnerable Rams team. I think I'm going to go with Allen on this one. In the wide receiver 2 matchup, we have Christian Kirk in Jacksonville taking on Houston versus Jerry Jeudy in Denver taking on KC. If Russell Wilson can play, maybe Jerry Jeudy as the KC's defense is good, but I just think that Christian Kirk might not have, he'll get some points, but I think Jeudy will have the better day. In the matchup of tight ends, we have TJ Hawkinson in Minnesota going against Green Bay versus Travis Kelce and KC going against Denver. I like Kelce. However, I think this week Hawkinson might actually have the better week. He had a monster week last week. Looking to continue that trend as I feel like we've struggled against tight ends a little bit, so this will be interesting. Travis Kelce, I feel like, will also just go off for a huge day here. In the flex spot, we have DJ Chark for Detroit going against Chicago, while DK Metcalf for Seattle going against the Jets. You could go Chark because it's Chicago, but Metcalf going against the Jets though, because it's the Jets. We'll go Metcalf. I don't know. I don't really like it though. In the defenses, we have the Niners going against Las Vegas versus the Rams taking on Pitt. I think we're going to go with the 49ers on this one because Las Vegas is not that great. Then in the kickers, we have Justin Tucker and Baltimore going against Pitt versus KC and Denver. And I think with that one, I would go Justin Tucker, just because they already have to go with a backup QB, and I think there might be some more field goals in that one. And he has a leg/cannon for... No, he just has a cannon on his leg. I don't know what analogy I was going for there. Which then brings us to our 7th place game in our losers bracket, in which it's the Bajayjays taking on the Lame Tanks. So, starting at the top, as per usual, Josh Allen and Buffalo taking on Cincy versus Kirko and Minnesota taking on Green Bay. I think Kirk's going to have the better day, but not by much. It's very I'm prepared to eat my words on that one. Running backs, we have DeAndre Swift in Detroit taking on Chicago versus Derrick Henry, who is actually downgraded to doubtful. So we'll just go with Swift on this one, despite the fact he's in a running back committee there. So it seems hopefully he'll have a breakout game, but who knows. Then in the running back 2 spot, we have J.K. Dobbins in Baltimore going against Pitt versus Alvin Kamara in New Orleans going against Philadelphia. I think Kamara might... No. New Orleans is struggling this season. I think J.K. Dobbins will have the better day. But who knows? Maybe... You know what? I'm going back to Kamara. Kamara hopefully will have the better day. Philly's defense is pretty decent, but they did just get into a shootout with Dallas, so we'll see. They could also very much just get... New Orleans could just get smothered by Philly, so we'll see. Then in the first set of wide receivers, we have Amari Cooper in Cleveland going against Washington versus Michael Pittman Jr. in Indy going against the Giants. Probably have to go with Amari Cooper just because of the team that Pittman's on, of the Colts. They're not good. Then in the second matchup of wide receivers, we have DJ Moore for Carolina going against Tampa versus Mike Williams, and the Chargers going against the Rams. Ooh, I don't think I'm going to go Mike Williams on this one. It's like I do like DJ Moore, but this is Carolina we're talking about going against a alright, if that, Tampa team. Then in the battle of the tight ends, we have George Kittle and San Fran going against Las Vegas versus Gerald Everett and the Chargers going against the Rams. You gotta go with Kittle and going against the Raiders. 100% love that matchup. In the flex spot, we have Devin Singletary in Buffalo going against Cincy versus Kenneth Walker in Seattle going against the Jets. Gotta go with Kenneth Walker as he's just been kind of the rookie sensation. Although I would expect a tiny bit out of Singletary, but nothing like that monster game he had. Then in the defensive spot, we have the Packers and Green Bay taking on Minnesota, going against the Broncos and Denver, going against KC. Oof, these are going to be tight. I think the Packers will have a better stat line than the Broncos will at the end of the week. Or end of the week. And then if we get into the kickers, we have Matt Gay for the Rams going against the Chargers versus Cameron Dicker, and the Chargers going against the Rams. Both these guys facing each other this week, or almost face each other. I think we'll screw it. We'll take a gamble, choose the Packers on this one. Oh wait, we redid that. And then for these two kickers, I'm gonna guess Cameron Dicker for the Chargers going to have a better stat line between the Chargers and the Rams. Then in our last matchup, we have the Dumpster Fire Bowl between Team Breeki and the Chicago Deviants. So I would probably expect that these guys are not going to set their lineups, as they haven't. So we shall see. But this is how things are looking. Both these QBs up here, Jalen Hurts and Lamar, are out. So hopefully they could switch those guys out. And the running backs, Fournette, or you have Cam Akers and the Rams going against the Chargers versus Leonard Fournette and TB going against Carolina. I'm going to guess Leonard Fournette just based off matchup. Then the second matchup of running backs, we have Aaron Jones and Green Bay taking on Minnesota versus Miles Sanders and Philly taking on New Orleans. I think Aaron Jones is going to have the better day going against that Minnesota team. Then in the first set of wide receivers, we have Stephon Diggs in Buffalo taking on Cincy versus Robert Woods and Tennessee taking on Dallas. Stephon Diggs, it's going to be terrifying to take on that Dallas team right now, or that Dallas defense. In the wide receiver 2 matchup, we have Devontae Adams and the Raiders taking on San Fran versus George Pickens in the Pitt taking on Baltimore. With Devontae Adams not having Derek Carr thrown to anymore, I'm going to roll with Pickens having the better day. In the tight ends, we have Pat Freiermuth and Pitt going against Baltimore versus Hunter Henry, New England going against Miami. I would guess that Pat Freiermuth is going to have the better day. In the flex matchup, we have Allen Robinson versus Michael Gallup, but Michael Gallup is the only one that's playing, so we're going to go with Gallup right away. We don't even know ifs and or buts. Then in the defenses, we have the Bills taking on Cincy versus Rams taking on the Chargers. I would The Rams are not a good defense, so I would definitely take the Bills going against Cincy. And then in the kickers, we have Daniel Carlson in Las Vegas taking on San Fran versus Tyler Bass and Buffalo taking on Cincy. Probably Tyler Bass, and the Bills taking on Cincinnati is going to have more field goals in it, I would expect, than Daniel Carlson, who, you know, there's a good chance they're probably not even going to kick any field goals if they can't move down the field. And that, my friends, brings us to the end of this fantastic episode. Like I said, these ones are a little bit shorter because we don't got to do power rankings. So, yeah, we went over the playoffs round 2 review and covered pretty much the winners bracket, winners consolation bracket, and the losers bracket, how that was shaping out. Then we flipped and went into our previews, in which case we discussed the final week of the season for each matchup. We looked at the winners bracket matchup, aka our championship match. Then we looked at our 3rd, 5th, 7th place games, and how those were going to break down. And then we even took a look at our last place game, aka the Dumpster Fire Bowl, and we took a look at how that was going to shape out as well. You guys have been amazing, and I love the shit out of you sports fans for hanging out with me every time I do one of these videos. It's always a pleasure. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, enjoyed hanging out. I hope to see you guys leave some feedback down below in the comments. If you didn't already subscribe to the channel, please do if you like the content. Other than that, I'll see you guys in the next video. And until next time, peace out, stay safe, and much love. Bye!